Okay, so without being overly dramatic, in a world where we can't pay attention to anything for more than 5 seconds before moving on to something else, where we work on many different things at the same time, where we have 20 different tabs open on our laptops. You know who you are. You are listening to me. Is it you, Brent? Is it you, Angela?
I feel so exposed right now as I'm closing apps on my phone.
Oh my goodness.
Angela.
I'm sorry.
That is legendary.
I didn't want to be distracted.
Oh,
All right, Kim, you have my undivided attention. I don't know about Angela's, but you have mine. I am listening.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
I'm sorry.
I'm kidding.
It's all right. You know what? But seriously, on a serious note, it happens. We never want to feel like we're not paying attention to people, right? We always want to give people our undivided attention.
Yeah.
But that is harder to do than it has ever been, I would say, in the history of the human race.
So, Kim, why is attention such an important topic for those of us who work in tech?
Well, if you work in tech, you're maintaining servers, keeping them up and running. You're maintaining applications, keeping them up and running. You are working on vulnerabilities, security issues. You are working on different platforms. You are building new things, constantly deploying. And, technology is supposed to make our lives more convenient, not harder. So that doesn't necessarily translate very well for a person who's keeping the technology running for the rest of us. I want to know how productivity comes into play when you're a person who is focused on keeping things running, but also a person that needs to make time to make new things.
I'm glad we're doing this episode because, you try to do these things that help you stay focused and get you more productive. And I'm wondering, do they really help? I need to figure this out because I struggle with this myself.
Do you want to just dive into it?
Please.
Let's do this.
This is Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat.
We're your hosts.
I'm Brent Simoneau.
And I'm Angela Andrews.
We're here to break down questions from the tech industry. Big, small, and, sometimes strange.
Each episode, we go out in search of answers from Red Hatters and people they're connected to.
Today's question, are we really as productive as we think we are?
Producer Kim Wong is here with her take.
So our first stop on this journey to productivity is in Canada with one Sam Milbrath.
I am a freelance copywriter and I write for several tech companies and actually nonprofits as well. And I do that probably part-time, and then other part-time, I'm also writing a fiction fantasy novel, and I'm running a wine business as well. My husband and I have a winery, and we're building it out.
She sounds busy.
Yeah, Sam is one of those people, as you would guess from all the things that she's involved with, she's very, very busy. So it would kind of be in her best interest and her prerogative to be knowledgeable about prioritizing and tasking things out and being productive. She also writes about productivity for Trello, which is an app that's all about productivity.
Oh. So what does she have to say about productivity?
Sam has a background writing specifically for tech companies, and those companies have made a lot of changes to the way they work. I asked her about the impact of those changes on developers, engineers, programmers, and other people who work in that space.
It's also just sort of ingrained into the culture of this sprints, which are great. But then a sprint isn't I read somewhere, actually I wrote about it too, but it was basically life is a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're always working in these sprints, it's just you're going to burn out. And that's kind of the ironic thing about all of these startup tech companies is that, they claim that they're going to be moving so fast and that they can get things done and all this stuff. But it's Yeah, but everyone has to take a break, and at what cost? And at some point you're going to slow down, because you become too big, and then you're kind of a slow-moving bureaucratic blimp.
The visual.
Yes, away with words.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I feel as though it's all theater right now.
Yeah.
Like there's so much going on because I don't know if we're trying to make up for something. And before that, in the past 10 years, it was because, technology is moving super fast and all of us are trying to keep up and all of us have multiple irons in the fire and we're, on multiple projects and we're doing multiple things. And it's that the number of things that we're engaged in and everything has a due date. Right?
Yes.
So you can't work kind of linearly. You have to kind
Yeah.
of bounce around, like Sam mentioned, you have to move around and try to stay nimble and do a little bit. But again, it feels like we're doing all this stuff and we're not really moving anywhere. To me, sometimes it really does feel like that. This is a really personal thing for me, talking about productivity and maybe the lack thereof.
Yeah, what really struck me about what she was saying was that, this is a marathon. Like it's not a sprint. And it's not a series of sprints either. And I think this really struck me because I'm a runner, and like if you just sprint and sprint and sprint and sprint,
Can't sustain it.
you're going to get injured, there's no way to sustain that. But, when you're running a marathon and when you're training for a marathon, you always schedule rest days, like you always schedule breaks and you're never working at the same, or you're never training, you're never running at the same tempo all the time.
That's a really good point, Brent. And I want to go back to Sam one more time to see what she has to say about technology and letting go so that you can make room for that rest and then that makes room for creativity.
It's a complicated topic for sure, because technology was made to make our lives easier. If it makes our lives more complicated, then we're doing something wrong, I think. What we bring to the table is like the creativity and the innovation and human problem solving. Like if we can focus on like letting go of control of things that are something that technology is supposed to be taking care of or managing, and then focusing instead on things that are the creativity or innovation, it's like kind of like separating the two.
Sam says that in her work, she's starting to see a trend or a shift of how people, especially people who work in technology, who work in IT, are thinking about productivity now. It seems like her idea of making the technology do the busy work and leaving the human brain to solve problems and create new things is starting to catch on a little bit.
This is sort of the argument that a lot of people make for like automation.
Yes,
It
exactly.
sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Yes. So we heard from Sam. She talked a little bit about how she works, how she writes about productivity, how she writes about distraction and the attention economy. But I wanted to talk to someone that was actually involved in the attention economy kind of explicitly.
My name is Ulf Schwekendijk, and I'm the CEO and founder of Centered App.
Ulf may be actually a kind of a familiar name to some of our listeners.
Yeah?
He's worked for years in Silicon Valley. He's worked as an engineer on a number of different prolific projects, and he's been very successful in his craft and his career. So it makes sense that he would be a poster child for productivity. I asked him how his app Centered helps people like him, people who need to focus and get things done in their working life.
Oh, so the name of the app is
Centered.
Yes.
It's very descriptive.
Yes.
Just remember that feeling, being in an airplane and shut off from any distraction, opening up your computer and just knocking out a task, and so much quicker than you would normally do that. That is kind of that feeling that we want to recreate with Centered. Centered is a productivity app that helps you to not just write down what you want to do, but it's the first app that actually tries to help you to get that work done.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
This is so funny because I used to come back from a trip and I would have like all this work done and I would have this like new idea for, whatever I was working on. And I would tell my boss this and she would be like, "Were you just on a plane?"
Oh, whoa.
And every time I would be like, "Yes, I just came back from, wherever I was."
Hey, folks, it's pilot Kim Wong speaking. You'll see that the seatbelt sign has gone off. We're expecting a very
Productive.
we're expecting a cruising altitude of 34,000 feet. Brent Simino, it's okay for you to be a genius now.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I do not work on planes.
Neither do I.
You just enjoy it.
I just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just headphones on.
There's something to that too. Yeah.
Hoodie on backwards. Like,
Yes.
that's me.
Hoodie on backwards.
The Snuggie variation of hoodie.
Basically.
Yeah. Gotta be warm. Well, Ulf talks about how the app Centered turns your computer into a concentration machine. That's his words. Designed to eliminate distractions so someone can focus on their work. It integrates with other apps to optimize focus time. It has an AI guide. His name is Noah. He kind of nudges you and keeps you on task. The app also has app-centric music that is at a specialized beat pattern of 60 to 90 beats per minute, which is optimized for concentration.
Nice.
All of this sounds pretty typical of your concentration app or your focus app, except for the one feature where a person can actually turn on their webcam so that other people can see them work and they can see other people work at the same time live. It's just video, no audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do this.
That is so interesting. I will go to YouTube. I will find a video of someone working at their desk. It's usually music in the background. And I'm working. And it almost feels as if we're just like, and when he gets up, it's like, all right, I'll get up, right? Because it's timed like that. Oh, I am so telling on myself, but it's almost like, well, it's work time. We're sitting here, we're working. And I tend to block a lot of things out because I don't know how I stumbled upon this thing, this genre of video.
Yeah, how did you find it?
I was trying to focus. And I needed something to help me like stay on task with something because I am easily distracted. I am so easily distracted. He's on his computer, with this really soothing music playing, and I sit here and it's like he'll get up and it's like, all right, it's time to get up.
So what the reason that I think I'm having this reaction is because so I do this thing, it's called Flow Club. And you sort of schedule it, and there's someone who sort of like leads the hour or the 2 hours or the 3 hours, and you have like a list of things that you want to do or work on, and you basically like work together on the internet. Like everyone turns off their mics and you check in at the beginning.
I've never.
You work on camera with a lot of people, and
ever heard of
then
this.
You're done after a while, and it's some of my most productive time.
That's amazing. I've never heard of anything like that. This was the first time I was actually introduced to this, like this kind of style of working.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a name for it. It's called the coaction effect.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
explain that.
Both of you are kind of like describing the coaction effect. It's something, in Ulf's words, there's some research done around this, and I'll let him explain because he does it in a way better way than I can. But it seems like when people are kind of working in the same space on different things, that they're able to focus better. I'll let him explain.
And there has been some research done around this concept of being able to see others and feel more accountable to your own work, and like basically having other people see you. Most of the time you don't stare at them at all, but it's just nice, like working in a coffee shop, to see that there are other people around, especially in these days where most of us are still working from home and feel very isolated. It gives you really this warm feeling of community around when you work.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that.
That is very interesting.
But it rings, it rings true to my experience.
You've been doing it. You've been doing it. You didn't know it had a name. That's
exactly.
all that is.
Yeah.
Ulf says the app, Centered, is designed to get a person to the state that he calls flow, which you talked about earlier, Brent, having a really deep focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And I say one thing, and this is the part I was talking about earlier. We're going to make a lot of people kind of uncomfortable right now, so just bear with us. But Ulf says that multitasking does not work.
I'm pretty sure you have listeners, and you might, think of it yourself when you hear this, that you think you're a great multitasker. There is absolutely no research backing up that is possible to do with the human brain. If you're a good multitasker, you can do up to 2 things well at the same time, at most. So what are we doing when we say we're multitasking is we're sacrificing brain power to do many things at the same time, pretty mediocre. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this had, a very busy workday listening to your podcast and think, oh my God, what did I actually do today? What did I get done today? And you cannot remember all of it, right? We have that all the time where you're just like, I feel exhausted, but I actually don't really know all the things that I have done. Well, that is a clear sign that you multitask too much because your brain doesn't actually retain that information well enough.
He has literally dragged everyone for filth. And this was the most honest thing anyone has ever said. And we put so much weight on this thing called multitasking, doing a lot of little things at one time.
Yes.
If you focused on one thing for that same amount of time, you would actually get something done. This is controversial, but Ulf hit the nail right on the head. And I think some of us may have needed to hear that.
Yes. So Ulf talks about multitasking in 2 ways. And in neither way is it a thing that exists. It is more like our own perception of ourselves, conflating how productive we really are. I wanted to know why it's so common now. Why is it that you even have job descriptions that say multitasking as part of the job description?
I've written those job descriptions.
Oh boy.
You're guilty of such things.
I'm guilty of absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So I wanted to know what Ulf thought about why multitasking, if it's so inefficient, it's so common.
It is easier said than actually executed. The concept around multitasking really came up with the rise of computing, where we built computers after CPUs, specifically after our brains in certain ways. And we figured, if a computer can do millions of things simultaneously and do them really well and fast, of course our brain has to do that too. Well, it turns out that's really not the case.
Ooh, he told us.
Exactly. According to Ulf, there is no scientific evidence that backs up multitasking's effectiveness. And don't just take his word for it. According to the National Institute of Health, the human brain lacks the architecture to perform 2 tasks at the same time optimally. To kind of break it down, the areas of our brain that are dedicated to decision-making and attention have very limited capacity. And in short, those areas are forced to compete against each other about what is the most important and relevant when we're working on something. So have you ever sat in a room or been at your desk and felt kind of an information overload when working on more than one thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So computers have been built with our brains in mind, but our brains are not computers, and they are never going to be a computer.
So, Kim, bringing it back to Ulf, what do you think is his one insight into attention?
In his words, productivity is about work and not planning for work. So,
wow.
Yeah. Trying to implement practices along those lines, that's going to make your self-image, that inner vision of you being this most productive person, is going to make it closer to reality. You also have to carve out a little time for distraction, just like you make time for everything else. In Ulf's words, some of those bugs that you're working on can wait.
What I'm rather suggesting is make time for it. Actually make time for it. Say, in my morning, I'm going to spend 15 minutes on my phone goofing off whatever I want to do, watching 7 snowboard jumps on Instagram Live, or whatever it is that, this is just whatever it is that I want to do for a certain time.
Another good point, when we're multitasking, when we're doing remote work, when we're constantly on our devices, for our brains, like, we know in our heart that is not necessarily work. We might be looking at Instagram videos of snowboard jumps, or in my case, talking dogs. But to our brains, because we're on our devices all the time, it all looks like work and it never ends.
Wow.
Yeah.
And are you saying that sort of like overloads our brains because it thinks it's work?
Yeah, exactly. It's because it's work that never ends. So if you're looking at your computer for 8 hours a day and then you immediately look at another screen, but you're looking at things that are supposed to be, I don't know, like looking at a live stream of somebody playing your favorite game, your brain still thinks you're at work because you're doing a lot of the same things that you'd be doing for the last 8 hours.
Okay, so this conversation that we're having right here reminds me of a book that I will read on and off, and it's called A Mind for Numbers.
Okay.
And it really talks about being intentional in your work, your studies, your whatever. And when a time is up, if we're putting time limits on when we spend on something, when that time is up, you must give your brain an opportunity to internalize everything that's just happened. So you have to do something different.
Yes.
So if I sit here for an hour and it's, I'm focused, I'm doing something, I'm studying, and my timer goes off, I get up from my desk, I go do something. I go, walk my dog or wash out my coffee cup or, iron my clothes, anything. When your brain switches away, it gives it the opportunity to internalize and mull over and turn those memories into longer term memories. Sometimes, and then you come back, you may have an aha moment that you couldn't have figured something out, but you've given your brain an opportunity to work on what you were just working on. So it's not for the sake of work. You're actually giving yourself a break. So your brain does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
I know multitasking is just a farce. I know it. And the culture that we're in, it just makes it's almost inevitable. And these behaviors, with or without an application, are almost, clutch when you're trying to actually be productive.
Yes, I agree.
When we start to talk about productivity, it to me, it launches us into conversations about, like, what are some hacks to do this, or how do you structure your day, or how do you do this and that. But it also sounds like kind of what we're talking about here is doing what's meaningful, like how do you get into that flow state? How do you learn a new programming language? How do you build that app that you have been working on,
Yes.
How do we do those things that are most meaningful to us and do less of the other stuff?
I think that the first step of really truly hacking your productivity is to get rid of your kind of self-image of a very productive person that you have created over time.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't say anything bad about you. It's just saying that this image that you have of yourself, especially if you're a person who multitasks and who has a lot of different things going on and a lot of different tabs open on your laptop, they may not be working at their best. And it's certainly not a sustainable habit. So getting rid of that kind of conflated image is kind of the first step of how people can make time for new things, learning a new language or creating a new app or learning other new things. And it's just a matter of being honest with oneself about what you're doing now, how it's working, and how it's not working.
Kim just brought it home. I think that was the end of the episode.
Yeah. Mic drop.
That feels right.
Well, today on Compiler, we want you to do nothing. Don't do anything. Go outside, read a book, go work on that painting project that you left in the corner 2 months ago. Take a break, do nothing. That's what I want.
I want that too.
I want that as well.
And that does it for this episode of Compiler.
Today's episode was produced by Kim Huang and Caroline Craighead. Victoria Lawton is our concentration machine. Just don't ask her about multitasking.
Our audio engineer is Christian Proham. Special thanks to Sean Cole. Our theme song was composed by Mary Enchetta.
Thank you to our guests, Ulf Schweckendieck and Sam Milbreath, for speaking with us.
Our audio team includes Lee Day, Stephanie Wunderlich, Mike Esser, Laura Barnes, Claire Allison, Nick Burns, Aaron Williamson, Karen King, Boo Boo House, Rachel Ertel, Mike Compton, Ocean Matthews, and Laura Walters.
If you liked today's episode, please follow us, rate the show, and you can even leave us a review. It really does help us out.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
All right, we'll see you then.